Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Anglo Election Insights, where today it's time to give a update on the Tasmanian state election, which is going to be held in just over 2 weeks' time, because we finally have some polling coming out. There's been some campaign announcements. We've had the close of nominations as well, so it's a good time to give an update, I think. So I thought I would begin on the issues, and there was a poll from the Australian Institute, or at least it was commissioned by the Australian Institute. I think YouGov actually did the poll, where they sort of focused on the stadium issue and found that basically Tasmanians are feeling pretty aggrieved by the deal that the state government has made with the AFL. But then there was some more detailed polling from YouGov, which came out earlier this week, and it's showing that health and housing are going to be the big issues. We've also got a couple of big economic issues, so state debt, taxation, as well as issues around privatisation, asset sales, which was something that the Liberals have sort of tried to walk back, but also the stadium features in here as well. What's interesting here is that 22% of people in their top three issues are saying that they are pro stadium, and 33% saying they are anti stadium. And I think I've got this theory that that's probably hurting Labor a little bit more at the moment. They are seen as slightly flip-floppy on the issue. There's some kind of rumblings on the inside that have been sort of stoked by the Greens, that a lot of Labor MPs and candidates aren't really on board, and they were obviously campaigning against it in 2024. Now they've flipped. So any kind of pro-stadium vote, I think, is more likely to land with the Liberals, whereas anti-stadium vote obviously is going elsewhere, and under Herr Clark that doesn't really help Labor. So that could prove to be a bit of a pain point overall. But yeah, when you look at the issues, the main ones are going to be health and housing, and then the state's economy and how debt is managed, which typically those, especially at this sort of time where you had the no confidence motion, and the Liberals' economic management hasn't really been ideal over the last sort of term and a bit. You would think that those are issues that are well and truly within Labor's wheelhouse, but we'll go through some of these polling numbers and have a look at some of the issues. So I've just been kind of chilling on Pulse Tasmania, just going through some of the articles, trying to get my head around what's being proposed, what sort of stuff is coming up. So I'll just go through a few little issues. So the Liberals, their kind of big ticket policy, I guess, is this state-owned insurer, which I think it seems to me that they're trying to pitch this as a bit of a us versus them, Tassie versus Mainlander type thing. That seems to be a real theme. I don't know if that's something that's always been a part of Tasmanian politics, because I haven't followed it very closely in the past, but they're really playing on that sort of, this will be our insurer. We're not going to have Tasmanians paying for Mainlander price hikes, whatever. So not the most kind of liberal policy, I would say, and it kind of goes into this broader theme of the state divisions of the major parties almost swapping roles in certain jurisdictions. New South Wales comes to mind as well, where you had you've obviously got Chris Minns kind of taking on the unions and looking to find cost savings and that sort of thing, and then the state Liberals there are whinging about cutting funding to certain departments, and then here obviously you've got Rockliff going after this state-owned insurer thing, and then on the other hand Dean Winter's talking more about where can we find savings in the budget, how come talking about handing over the Marinus Link and getting rid of certain public servant executive positions and that sort of thing. So it's a pretty interesting conversation, and it's the battle lines are being drawn in a sort of a weird way. Labor's also looking at power bills, like monthly billing, and I think there was a proposal to cap the rates of increase, as well as freezing car registration costs. This isn't really big stuff. Then we've got a big spending commitment from the Liberals on health. This is the only one I've really seen, but I think a lot of the candidates are going pretty hard on health as well. So both sides, particularly the Liberals, have identified that as a big issue. And as I said, Labor they're talking about the economy a lot, and I guess given that the election was basically called because of Labor's no confidence motion, which was based on economic management, supposedly. I'm not surprised to see this, and the business community's kind of got behind it. That's certainly what Labor's going to be campaigning on. And then, as I mentioned, the Marinus link. The debate is over. Can Tasmania sort of afford to keep sort of their share of it in terms of their voting rights, in terms of where the project kind of goes. I'm not 100% across that issue, but just another example of the Liberals trying to keep a hold of state assets and Labor trying to let them go, which, obviously a little bit different to what we're used to in the current sort of political dynamic. So let's have a look at the polls, and the poll bludger has put together a nice little graph for us. So we've got one from YouGov and one from Demos AU. Just a note on the Demos AU, it was commissioned by some sort of peak body that we don't know who that is. So their interests could be, with a certain party or on a certain issue, which would potentially poison the poll. So just keep that in mind. But as far as the totals go, YouGov had Labor poking their head in front in a result that was pretty similar to the last EMRS poll from mid-May, and then Demos AU had it kind of a little bit more similar to the 2024 election result, with the Liberals ahead by about 8% to Labor, but a high Green vote and a particularly high independent vote, and some other minor parties too. What was striking here was the Liberal numbers in Braddon, 44%. So without JLN potentially sucking up, 11-12% of the vote, you could see the Liberals winning a fourth seat, particularly with their stacked ticket in Braddon. But at the same time, I think both polls are showing that the Liberals are really going to struggle to hang on to their third seat in Franklin. And in fact, in the YouGov poll, it put Labor in the box seat to claim that. So both William Bowe and Kevin Bonham have put together some potential seat totals based on these poll numbers. So I'll just go through Dr. Kevin Bonham's. Under the YouGov numbers, that would be a slight lead for Labor, 14 to 13 seats, and then the Greens only winning 4, apparently, and Independents winning 4. And then for Demos AU, it's 13 to the Liberals, 11 to Labor, and then 5 Greens and 4 Independents, 2 unclear. Obviously quite divergent results, but neither side anywhere near majority government, which is an interesting one because over Tasmania's political history, there has been a tendency for, if one party appears to be front runner to form a majority, the state tends to swing in behind them. I guess Tasmania electorally has a pretty swingy electorate. Like we saw at the federal election in 2022, they swung slightly towards the Liberals in an otherwise really bad cycle for them, and then swung decisively to Labor. But, within living memory, back in 2014, 2018, 2021, the Liberals were able to achieve majority government 3 times in a row with, over half or nearly half the primary vote alone. So we can't take anything for granted here, and can't necessarily expect that we're going to get a status quo result just because the polls are showing that. Kevin Bonham also mentioned that there's some other like private poll that he knows of. I don't know if it's a party internal or something, but what was interesting here was that it kind of fit between where the two published polls were. So both major parties in the low 30s in terms of primary vote, with the Liberals ever so slightly ahead. But the independent numbers were a little bit down based on... the independent numbers were a little bit down compared to the other two polls. Because if we look here, Demosay, you had it at nearly 20% and YouGov on 18%, which that's pretty high, and polling can sometimes overstate the independent vote. And you've got to be careful with Herr Clark, because if one independent or two independents don't grab the lion's share of that vote, then the flow isn't great in terms of preferences between independents, and it'll leak quite a lot. So even if there's 5 candidates who between them get about 15% of the vote, if it's spread pretty evenly and there's a lot of leakage, it's unlikely that any of those independents would end up getting elected. So I think we want to be careful before we start saying, there's going to be a massive crossbench here. But some of the numbers are pretty wild. Clark, 30% for independents, which that would indicate that both Kirsty Johnson and Elise Archer could be in with a shot. And then in Franklin, in the Demosay U poll, 35% for independents, which indicates a pretty high vote for Peter George, particularly looking at these green numbers here. So it looks like perhaps he is taking a fair bit of the green vote. But at the same time, with Labor only on 22%, you would think that David O'Byrne would be safe as well. The other thing to note is that there's not really much joy for the Nats here. They were named in the Demosay U poll. Their best result in terms of the divisions was in Bass with 5.1%, even though it's in Lyons and Braddon where they actually have the ex-JLN candidate and John Tucker in the case of Lyons. So that's quite interesting. Apart from that, I think for me, the upshot from all of this is that there certainly is hope for the Liberals, credible hope that they can achieve pretty much a status quo result. The most likely scenario is that they lose a seat in Franklin, looking at this, but none of this polling really suggests that they're going to lose seats in Bass, Braddon or Lyons, and it doesn't appear that, as we first thought, that second seat in Clark looks under threat just based on these initial numbers. But they don't really have a pathway to 3 seats in Franklin, it would appear. But this Demosay U poll definitely points to the possibility that they could win 4 in Braddon. So that would be 14 seats total if they were able to win an extra one in Braddon and they lose one in Franklin. Otherwise, most likely it's kind of 13, maybe 12 on a bad night. But if we see anything like the federal election, they're probably looking at like 10 or less. As for Labor, the pickup opportunities, it looks as if they're definitely in the hunt in Lyons and Bass, and also Braddon, if we go by YouGov. And just a note on YouGov, you guys might recall that they had those that set of seat polls just prior to the federal election, in addition to their MRP polling. So here it is here. So it was in a bunch of different, mostly rural electorates. You can see here in Braddon, they pretty much nailed the Liberal primary, and pretty close in Lyons as well. And they actually understated Labor's vote in both. But both of those pointed to a Labor victory. And I remember being quite critical at the time. So YouGov do have a reasonable record there, so those numbers should be fairly encouraging for Labor. But again, just thinking about Tasmania's electoral history and how there can certainly be a divergence between state results and federal results, even in the same year. Go and have a look at 2010, for example. We'll see how it all pans out. Apart from that, there's not a great deal to say. So I'll be in with some more predictions probably next week. See if there's any more announcements, any more polling as well. I'd be interested to see some more polling from EMRS, just to follow up their poll from May. The one last thing I guess I should point out is that Rockliff still enjoys a lead over Winter as preferred premier. So it was 12% back in May. YouGov has it as 7%, and Demos.au has it as 9%, which, the preferred premier does tend to skew towards the incumbent. So approval ratings might be a better measure of where things really are, but worth keeping in mind that leading up to the federal election, even though some of the headline poll results were showing a pretty close race, like maybe 2 or 3% in it at the two-party preferred level, there was like 15 to 20% gaps between Albanese and Dutton. So maybe that could be the more decisive factor if Rockliff is able to hang on to his lead there. There was an interesting note in the Demos.au poll as well that I think they did a forced choice thing, and it was like 55 to 45% believed that Dean Winter was to blame for the election, as opposed to Rockliff. So that was an interesting little point as well. Anyway, that will do us for today. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Again, we'll have some more videos and some more coverage on this election, but just wanted to give my perspective a little bit on some of those polls and just talk a little bit about some of the issues. But if you enjoyed it, please subscribe for more. Again, I'll be covering this election up until polling day, and hopefully if I've got the night off work, I'll be able to cover it live as well. So like the video if you enjoyed it. Again, subscribe if you want to see more coverage of this election and future elections. And otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers all.